Hi, everyone. I'm Rena Ninen. Thank you for joining us. A massive 7.1 magnitude earthquake hit Southern California last night, causing damage and injuries throughout the area. It's the second earthquake to rattle the area in 2 days. It struck in the Mojave Desert. It's near the town of Ridgecrest, California. Our Carter Evans is in Ridgecrest with more.
These earthquakes have just rocked this community, and they've done a lot of damage. This is just one small example inside the East Ridge Market. We're here at Ridgecrest after the first quake, and then at 8:19 last night, the shaking started again and grew increasingly violent.
Everybody okay?
This is the first glimpse of the damage inside a Ridgecrest supermarket. Tiles fell from the ceiling, food and other items flew off the shelves.
The air is really thick, dusty. This is a bad one.
Gas lines ruptured, sparking numerous fires. California officials say they're bracing for the worst.
There have been a number of injuries reported. There's been a significant increased number of EMS calls to the 911 centers. Huge priorities right now for medical support and for firefighting and for emergency power.
Even in Los Angeles, more than 150 miles away.
It continues
this is a very strong
to rattle
earthquake.
pretty strong here.
8:21 here on the air. We're experiencing very strong shaking.
Wow.
I think we need to get under the desk.
All right, we're going to go to break. We'll be right back after
We'll be right
this.
back.
Wow.
The magnitude 7.1 quake came just 1 day after Thursday's 6.4 jolt, which at the time was the largest earthquake to hit California in 2 decades. That quake turning life into chaos without warning turned out to be a foreshock. But this is what's left behind. The region was just starting to clean up, like the volunteers at the Ridgecrest Library, picking up thousands of books that fell from the stacks.
We're just so thankful it was closed. Because can you imagine those books falling on some poor kid or some elderly person?
The library was also closed when last night's quake hit. Elsewhere in Ridgecrest, security video captured the shaking at a laundromat and inside this convenience store. The tape stops as the power cuts out. We talked to the store owner, Tony Abdulatif.
How much do you think you lost here?
Be honest with you, from yesterday and today, I would say about 100,000.
No insurance.
No insurance for the earthquake, of course.
You got to have earthquake insurance, and even then, it usually doesn't cover the contents of your home. The damages to this store are going to cost a lot of money, and the cost to this community is going to be much higher. The good news is there are no reports of injuries or deaths, but the aftershocks continue. And seismologists say the probability of another strong one occurring over the next few days is very high.
Dr. Wendy Bohan joins us now from Washington. She's a science communication specialist and geologist for the Incorporated Research Institutes for Seismology. So, Dr. Bohan, we're hearing that the fault where the earthquake happens is actually now growing. What does that mean exactly? We heard Carter Evans in that piece talk about future earthquakes coming in the next few days.
Right. So the 2 earthquakes that have happened, the 2 big ones, the magnitude 6.4 on the 4th of July, and then the big one, the magnitude 7.1 that happened today, are both related. They occurred on the same fault. In fact, the first earthquake ruptured 2 faults or broke 2 faults that were at right angles to each other. And so these earthquakes are all related, and that tells us a little bit about what we can expect in the future.
And how long do you think that these aftershock tremors could go on for?
That's a great question, and something that people in particular around the epicenter want to know. And so we can expect there to be felt earthquakes for a long time in the future. The USGS gives an aftershock forecast that tells us what we can expect. There's not a high probability of having a larger earthquake, but we do have a high probability of experiencing earthquakes like a magnitude 5 and maybe even a magnitude 6. So people need to be prepared to experience more shaking, and especially if you're in some of the small towns near the epicenter like Trona or Ridgecrest. This is really going to rattle your nerves. You guys have been having a hard time. Expect there to be more shaking. Make sure that you drop, cover, and hold on as soon as you feel the earthquake shaking. And you know what? Earthquakes are scary. It's okay to be scared. You just also have to be prepared.
Yeah, I want to also ask you, it's so terrifying looking at the video and to hear you talk about a 5 or a 6 potentially could come in the coming days. We just don't know. But the earthquake and most of these aftershocks, they happen in a fairly centralized area in California. Can you sort of explain why that is, that it's happening where it is right now? Is there a sense?
Right. So All of California is actually part of the plate boundary between the North American and the Pacific plate. So all of that is helping to take up the strain of these two big massive plates that are moving. The area where it occurred is in an area called the Eastern California Shear Zone. So we don't have a lot of really big earthquakes out there, but we do have a lot of earthquakes in that area. So all of these earthquakes are related. The foreshock, the main shock, and then all of these aftershocks are happening in this location on a broad scale because of the motion between those two plates. And if you sort of zoom in a little bit, they're happening because each one of those earthquakes makes another earthquake more likely. Usually they're smaller. Occasionally, very rarely, they're bigger, and that's what we saw with this most recent event.
So when you talk about the 6.4 earthquake that took place on the 4th of July in California, how do you compare these two? Are they, how do they relate?
Well, that was a foreshock, and really that's just terminology. That means that that was the earthquake that happened before a bigger earthquake. And there's no way for us to know before another earthquake happens that that earthquake was going to be a foreshock. You know, we said that there's a small probability of there being a large earthquake after that event. Well, this large earthquake is that small probability. So occasionally it does happen. There's about a 3% chance right now that there would be another event of magnitude 7.1 or larger. So if you think about a weather forecast, if you have a 3% chance of rain, would you take an umbrella? No, but you might still want to be prepared. And it's important to note that even earthquakes of magnitude 5 and 6 are going to make shaking that people can feel. Those can cause damage. If there's already structures that have been damaged, they can cause further damage. So they're not to be taken lightly.
Yeah, it's just incredible to see people's reaction as they're going through this. Even the anchors on the anchor desk, you can see just how terrifying this can be. People talk about this, and we saw that news anchor. Is that the quickest thing you should do? Is just take cover under a desk if it's the one thing you can do?
Right. You want to do those other things before the earthquake happens. So when you feel earthquake shaking, immediately drop down, take cover under a sturdy object if you can, and then hold on. That table could actually like jolt out of the way. What you're trying to do is make sure that nothing can fall on you. If you're inside, stay inside. If you're outside, stay outside. Stay away from power lines, trees, branches, things that could fall on you and injure you. Those are the things that we're trying to avoid here.
Good advice, especially in a moment where you might not be thinking as clearly as you would like to. I want to thank you very much, Dr. Wendy Bohan, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.